Yo, the enemy's public, I gotta keep my eyes open. Pay attention, stop walking around like you blindfolded. This not the World Cup, but Nasir be kicking knowledge. This is the type of information you can never learn in college. It's time to fight back, it's no more trying to play it cool. We got interviews, podcasts, and got the latest news. So sit back and relax, we about to get it started. Earth is a canvas, and guess who's the con artist? They brainwashing us, the system corrupted. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. I said you are now rocking with the enemy's public. Hey.
Peace. This is the enemy's public. I have a question dealing with Russia, China, and others forming a coalition against the U.S. Is the United States creating a legion of doom? Moscow has directed a lot of vitriol towards the West over the past year. The volume of that rhetoric sometimes drown out an awkward fact about Moscow's foreign policy, reorientation away from the West and towards allies like China and Iran. Russian elites are not exactly thrilled with their new partners. In conversations with Russian academics, there has been plenty of grumbling about the meager quality of Chinese support. For example, this reflects a long-standing Russian hubris towards its eastern neighbor, dating back to the days of Stalin and Mao. The Russian disdain directed towards Iran is even greater. These feelings are mutual. In conversation with Chinese diplomats, they express considerable exasperation with Russia's action with Ukraine. For them, the invasion upset a strategic situation that they believe was favorable to China. Ordinarily, Chinese people still harbor resentment towards Russia. Chinese students vent in great detail about territorial land grabs by 19th century czars that have yet to be reversed. Similarly, Russian colleagues have complained that their bilateral relations with Iran have been stymied by Tehran's historical grievances. Despite these lingering resentments, however, the past year has taught all of these countries an all-important lesson. As much as they might have issues with each other, they have a much bigger issue with the United States. Over the past year, while imposing extensive sanctions on Russia, the United States has also taken an extremely hawkish turn on China. The policies expressing this sentiment range from stringent exports control to public support for Taiwan to the possible banning of TikTok. At the same time, the Biden administration has essentially continued status quo policies towards Iran. Efforts to revive the Iranian nuclear agreement have failed. This leaves all three countries under various degrees of U.S.-led sanction regimes, and unsurprisingly, they are starting to work more closely together. Iran is in its final stages of achieving full membership in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a security forum led by China and Russia. China helped broker an entente between Iran and Saudi Arabia. NATO Security General Jens Stoltenberg is increasingly concerned that China might supply weapons to Russia to assist Ukraine. The relationship between Iran and Russia has mushroomed during the course of the war in Ukraine, with NSC spokesman John Kirby labeled it a full-scale defense partnership. The United States has valid reason to oppose all three countries. China is a peer competitor that has behaved in an increasingly autocratic and bellicose manner during Jinping's rule. Iran's regime remains wildly illiberal, pursuing policies that have threatened U.S. allies in the Middle East. Russia, their actions in Ukraine speak for themselves, according to the United States. Still, when you throw in allegations like North Korea alleging selling weaponry to Russia, it sometimes seems as though the United States has inspired its own less comical legion of doom. Now, I want to show this video real quick. Again, Russia, China, and others are forming a coalition against the United States. This nascent alliance feeds into an American predilection for lumping all U.S. adversaries into the same basket. During the heyday of the Cold War, many U.S. policymakers assumed that the communist bloc was monolithic. In this century, parts of the foreign policy community have frequently posted that the United States faces an axis of something. In January 2002, George W. Bush called out Iran, Iraq, and North Korea in his State of the Union address, warning that states like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. While none of these countries were paragons of virtue, neither were they cooperating with each other or with Al-Qaeda. A decade later, during the 2012 president election, Mitt Romney foreign policy warned about an emergency axis of authoritarianism. Romney's warning was dismissed at this time, but over the past year, observers from across the political spectrum have wholeheartedly embraced the idea. The vague unease that U.S. observers feel because most of the global South is not on board with the sanctions of Russia feeds into this fear that much of the world is uniting against the United States. Now, my sentiment on this is, when you got a bully that's bullying the whole community, take this world as a community. When you're a bully, you're slapping up the little guys, you're walking through the town, people are going to get tired of you. And they're going to devise a plan eventually to jump the bully, to take the bully down and out. See, I'm not one of these patriots. And I also don't wish bombing of a nation that I'm living in. Yet, there's nothing I can do about or say about when someone is bullying other nations, setting up foreign policy that favors them and oppress others. What can I say about that when the nation that I live in is doing that? When you're a bully, eventually the people you're bullying is going to come after you. They're going to jump you. Now, we have policy in the United States That's against bullying. A person can't even say anything without it being called bullying. Words will get your channel taken off YouTube or off any social media, even if it's the truth. You can get your channel struck. You can get your channel taken off any of these social media platforms. And it's implemented in the schools that bullying is prohibited, which is a good thing because no one should be bullied, whether it's virtual or in person. I don't agree with bullying anyone. Yet, when you're not living by that example, when you are a bully telling people not to bully, that's contradictory and it's hypocritical and it's self-righteous. Yet, the United States, when they interfere in people's business. I was listening to the comedian George Wallace, and he said something that resonated with me. He said, just imagine if the United States didn't send any money outside of this country. We can wipe out any type of homelessness and joblessness and anything that's ailing this nation. We will be able to wipe that out if we just kept our money in this nation. And it's the same with my people. If we kept our money in our communities and didn't go and give it right back to our open and consistent enemy, as soon as we get paid, we're finding somebody to give our money to. We don't want to save money. We want to give it right back to them. And our money don't even stay in our communities a full day. Our money goes back out of our community in hours, as opposed to other people. Their money circulate in their community for days. And most case scenario, they spend their money with each other. Now, peace to the brother Big Dog Philly OG. Now, pardon me a second. We spend our money on the most frivolous things. And it stays in our community for a few hours before it's gone. And it's the same with the United States. And it's a slap in our face when people come here and receive more money than the citizens. It's a slap in our face when you see people who are citizens of this nation sleeping under bridges, homeless, sleeping on park benches, sleeping at bus depots, and when someone comes from other nations, they get accommodated in hotels. Put them in hotels for a few weeks or whatever amount of time they're in. Yet the citizens that live in this nation are sleeping on park benches, sleeping under bridges, sleeping in bus depots, being harassed because they want to rest. Now, in the current moment, it is difficult to deny that Russia, China, Iran, North Korea are taking actions that run contrary to the United States interests. It is not obvious, however, that the cooperation between these countries, if any, is anything more than tactical in nature. For Iran and North Korea, any opportunity to tweak the United States hand and break out of their current economic isolation is a welcome move. Similarly, Russia is desperate for assistance from any quarter as a means of combating the toll that sanctions and the war are inflicted on the Russian economy. All the historical grievances and anxieties that Russia, China, and Iran have in dealing with each other have not magically disappeared. They have simply been sublimated by their collective resistance to U.S. pressure. The United States can respond to this emerging coalition in one of two ways, both unappetizing. One approach is to embrace the mannequin worldview and continue to adopt policies that oppose these clusters of countries for the foreseeable future, where one examines each country in this nascent legion of doom. The United States has valid grounds for sanctions and other forms of containment. Iran has been pursuing a nuclear weapons program and a ballistic missile program and expended considerable funds to destabilize U.S. allies in the Middle East. Russian allies have repeatedly invaded its neighbors and bears responsibility for starting the largest land war in Europe since World War II. Beyond the blatant fact, Vladimir Putin has been quite willing to make mischief in NATO countries, ranging from disinformation campaigns to assassination attempts on dissidents. China Peace. Pardon me, brothers and sisters. I was just knocked out of the stream. Something happened, and pardon me. Experiencing a little technical difficulties. Apologize for that. Yet the I don't know where I was with this situation. I could say this. Russia has repeatedly invaded its neighbors and bears responsibility for starting the largest land war in Europe since World War II. Beyond the blatant fact, Vladimir Putin has been quite willing to make mischief in NATO countries, ranging from disinformation and campaigns to assassinate people on dissidents. Now, while lumping America's adversaries together might feel conceptual, appealing, it also creates complications. First, it makes it look much harder to build coalitions of containment. India might be on board with containing China, for example, but historical ties will make it harder to oppose Russia. The U.S. will have little choice but to rely on its coalition, like NATO, that they don't entirely cinch up. The bigger problems is that the mannequin worldview overlooks the ways that the United States foreign policy have thrived when it divided rather than united opposing coalitions. A key element of George Kennan's doctrine of containment was exploiting fissures in the communist bloc. This led to warming ties with Tito's Yugoslavia in the 1950s and Mao's China in the 1970s. Neither of these countries resemble anything close to the liberal democracy, but the United States found common cause with them to focus on a greater threat, the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union is no more. It's been, destroyed. Back when Afghanistan and Russia went to war, the United States allied with Afghanistan and they fought Russia. And they promised to rebuild Afghanistan after the war was over. And also the Afghanistan was brought to ruins, and the United States reneged on the deal. And that's the problem that Afghanistan had with the United States. Now, I'm going to play this video real quick. That's dealing with this entire situation. Now, again, I always say, when you're a bully, when you're walking through the community, the world, in this case, as a bully, people get tired of bullying. Now, these people may not like each other. It's the same exact thing that the nation that we live in do. Like, the United States don't like Afghanistan, but they were allied with Afghanistan to defeat Russia. They were allied with any nation that is weaker than them, that they can actually get into a coalition with them to go after somebody they like less than the person they're allying with. This is where we're at today. Among other things that's internal in the United States. Now, it's a whole lot of nations that will love, you know, when somebody's done something to you and you wait for that day that you can get them back. That's what we're coming to. And a lot of nations will get involved with a coalition if they could go and take down the U.S. And we're here, people, you know, citizens, they don't ask us. They just get involved. They don't even ask us, should we get involved with this? Because most of us would say no. Keep our money here and stop sending our soldiers to other nations to fight wars that have nothing to do with us. Now, with all the humanitarian acts that the United States call themselves doing, why they don't do it with their own citizens? You want to be the world police and want to be a humanitarian to others, yet people in your own nation are suffering. People are homeless. People are hungry. People have mental illnesses that they send the wrong people to deal with. We can't even get that straight, but we want to go outside the United States to help other people. We can't even deal with homelessness and mental illness. Why? Because the most mental ill people is the people that's in government. They're mentally ill. Whenever you have someone who is mentally ill and the police show up and don't have compassion for that person, they want compliance from that person. The person is mentally ill, so you're not going to resonate with that person. So you don't handle that person like you would handle a person who have understanding, who know what you're saying to them. So they end up dead, the person that's mentally ill, or even the person that's suicidal. If a person's suicidal, you need somebody to talk them down, not push them down, not shoot them center mass in the chest. What good are you if you can't stop someone from committing suicide? Peace to my brother Bronx Flat Power God. Peace to Grateful. Thanks for the sub, sis. Peace to the brother, the realest McCoy. My brother Big Dog Philly OG. I put the link in the chat. Anybody want to come up? You can do so. Everybody that's in this chat right now, you don't need permission. Just hit the link and we can talk about this coalition that Russia, China, and others are forming against the United States. While we're partying and BSing, this is what's going on. And a lot of us, that's what we're going to be doing when we're partying and BSing. We're going to be dying at the peak of our enjoyment because this is going to be something different. It's going to be different. If there's a World War III in all of these nations that hate the United States, is forming a coalition against the United States. That's like taking out the big bully. Nobody likes a bully. I know I don't. Not saying that I want all of this to happen, this war and all that, because we're right in the middle of it. We're in the belly of the beast. And that's something none of us, unless we're in the clear, should wish for, because that's what they describe. This is what they call the great and dreadful day. This right here, those who were walking around being a bully, it'd be great and it'd be dreadful for the bully. And for those who around the bully. See, the bully don't care who's around him, because sometimes the bully keep people around him to be that casualty. That's where we're at. Now, the paradox for American policymakers is that of all the countries opposing the United States, China is simultaneously the biggest threat and also the country that would be the ripest for more positive outreach. By any metric, China is the only country that comes close to being a peer competitor to the United States, meaning that they can actually fight back. When you hear a bully wanting to talk it out, wanting to be diplomatic, that means that person can flex muscle just like them. That person can actually fight them back. They got the tools. That person can actually do damage to them also. And that's when diplomacy come in. Diplomacy come in then. Yet when you can smack a little country around like Iran and Iraq, which is like the size of Texas, there's no diplomacy. It's gangsterism. Roll with us or we'll roll over you. That's how they handle little, small countries like that. You won't hear them talking about India do this or else. No, they have nuclear weapons also. You shoot one at us, we're going to shoot one back at you. That's when diplomacy comes in. And diplomacy, there's nothing wrong with diplomacy, because there's really no winner in a nuclear war. There's no winner. And it's going to be that'll be different, because it'll be fought on this land. That means bombs will be going off over here as opposed to the United States going 9 and 10,000 miles away fighting a war. It's not necessarily even fighting a war. Being an occupying force over there, bombing and killing people. Yet the same thing would be happening here. Now, opposing China is one of the few foreign policies that inspires genuinely bipartisan support. At the time, or at the same time, compared to the likes of Russia or North Korea, China is the Legion of Doom member with the greatest equities in the current international system. The primary reason China's support of Russia has been limited to date is because Beijing benefits far more from its tirade with the rest of the world than with Russia. This week's summit between Putin and Xi should offer some clues about just how robust their partnership is growing. Now, they've been talking and discussing and, again, forming a coalition against the West, in particular, the United States. Because of the United States foreign policy, and also because of, the meddling, the bullying, the do it my way or it's going to be no way. For U.S. policymakers, that question going forward will be to choose from a set of unsavory options. They could continue to implement a foreign policy that midwives an anti-American coalition. They can prioritize containing China and soften their approach towards countries that pose a more proximate threat to the United States and its allies and partners, or they can decide that China is the devil they know best and try to foster a new equilibrium in the Sino-American relationship. Given the unsteady state of the world, repairing the Sino-American relationship is the option that offers the most promise. Given the unsteady state of American politics, however, it is regrettably that option that both President Biden and his Republican opponent may be least likely to embrace. See, there's nothing wrong with diplomacy, especially when you're going to put millions of people in harm's way. Millions. See, we need to understand China alone has 1 billion people more than the United States. China's back number is larger than the United States' entire population. Understand that. And they have a very large army. I'm not going to even pretend to know how powerful that army is. Yeah, I know they have a very large army and they are not going to back down unless the diplomacy is even Steven, as Malcolm X would say. It's not going to be okay. We do this to keep you from attacking us. No, we're going to have diplomacy that both of us can benefit from, which is righteous anyway, because if fair is change, there's no robbery in the fair is change. So I'm going to be keeping an update on this coalition that they're forming against the United States. Hopefully, there won't be no violence, because first, there's not going to be a winner if they use nukes. And I don't want anybody who I care about to be in the middle of anybody else's foolishness, anybody else's violence. This is the enemy's public. I am Bro.Nasir. Like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section. Peace.
Yo, the enemy's public, I gotta keep my eyes open. Pay attention, stop walking around like you blindfolded. This not the World Cup, but Nasir be kicking knowledge. This the type of information you can never learn in college. It's time to fight back, it's no more trying to play it cool. We got interviews, podcasts, and got the latest news. So sit back and relax, we about to get it started. Earth is a canvas, and guess who's the con artist? They brainwashing us, the system corrupted. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. You are now rocking with the enemy's public. I said you are now rocking with the enemy's public. Hey.